You all looking well? Thank you for holding the fort down for me. Good to see some friends of ours. So today and tomorrow, we're going to be hearing from the Department of Education on varying topics. You have a handout in front of you. There's a handout for day 2. I think Christy's got that. We'll probably get that out tomorrow. But at any point in time, while the department's presenting, if the committee members have questions, feel free to interrupt, stop, ask questions. This is your time. We'll be here as long as you want to be, or as short as you want to be honest with you. So this is your time, senators. So feel free to, take up as much time as you want. Not only we'll have a hearing tomorrow morning, I think we're going to meet on the 28th as well. Is where we're scheduling the next hearing for. And Holly and I are coming up with the topics, and we'll get that out to you as well. And so once again, I appreciate everyone being here, coming back, and I guess we'll turn it over to Dr. Evans.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. How are y'all? Good, good. Thank y'all so much for allowing us to come over and spend some time with you. As I talk, we'll leave the slide up. Well, it went away. That slide pretty much speaks for itself, and some of the content that is on the slide will also be in some of the words that I'll be saying here. Just very brief introduction to what's taking place. But again, thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman DeBar. Thank each and every one of you legislators for allowing us to be here. And even more important than that, thank you for your support of public education. I'll tell you, in my work around the country, there are very few states where you see the relationship we have between our lawmakers and our public education system. And I will tell you that it does not go unnoticed, and it also makes our job much easier to be able to work with you because the support that you provide us as an agency, as well as all of our school districts and students in the state of Mississippi. Just over a decade ago, we all know Mississippi was at a crisis point in K-12 education. We can remember those days, the days when we walked into the room. I'm sure when you walked into the room, you really didn't want to talk about public education. And we've definitely come a long way since then. In 2013, we all remember those days where we ranked 50th in education based on the quality counts education rating that comes out each year. And in 2013, I like to say that we became very honest with ourselves because we were rated an F. We were rated an F and at the bottom or near the bottom in pretty much every category in which public education is rated nationally. Some of those reasons centered around our graduation rate, which was 75.5% at that point in time. And now we know our graduation rate has outpaced the nation's graduation rate for several years now. Our our fourth graders were one full grade year behind our neighboring states in literacy. We all know how we attack that to improve that and how we'll continue to push forward with those efforts. And as well as our performance on the NAEP assessment was horrendous. We were at the bottom of the barrel there as well. And again, we all know what the NAEP assessment is. We know that it's basically the nation's report card for education. It's the only common assessment that all states take. And we use it as our measuring stick. While districts use our state assessments as their measuring stick, if you will, we obviously do that as a state to measure our performance. Some of the issues that we had additionally is we had a significant honesty gap in our state at that point in time. The differences between the rigor of our state assessments and the NAEP assessment were tremendously different. And it wasn't until we made the decision as a state with your support that we increased the rigor and the expectations of the education of our students through the changing of our assessment programming that we started to see these changes. But we do know that it takes time for this to happen, which is why people refer to it as a miracle. We obviously refer to it as a marathon because we're very intentional about the process in which our state has undergone to improve the educational performance for our students. Today, we'll share with you how our coordinated efforts, including effective implementation, again, of legislation, strong policy, strategic planning, and more importantly, the hard work and commitment of teachers and students, as well as our district staff and leaders, to ensure every Mississippi student receives a quality education. So to get started, we have Dr. Christy Hovanitz here, who is the Senior Policy Fellow for Excel in Ed. She'll provide you with some context from both a state and federal level, or national level, I'm sorry, about how some of these educational reforms have helped Mississippi. And also she obviously can speak to how some of the work that's taking place in other states. So thank you.
Mississippi's a national story. These billboards I saw on my way to the airport to fly here. I learned you shouldn't take pictures while you're driving. But it's a real crisis Minnesota has trying to keep up with the state of Mississippi, specifically in fourth grade reading. Minnesota has a long history of being a high-performing state, but they've been resting on their laurels. They haven't had the political will to hold students to high expectations. We're now at the national average and ranked 27th in the nation compared to Mississippi. Be proud of your success. You have done a lot of really, really amazing things for students in your state. And as we talk about assessment and accountability and all of the reforms that have happened, let's think about this not just in the context of education for education's sake, but it's for the prosperity of your state and for our collective futures here in Mississippi, economically, socially, and for your community. So congratulations on all the success you've achieved so far. We'll talk a lot more about that later in the presentation. But how did we get here to have an opportunity to have this data, to know how we're performing and what's happening? It really all started, I could give you the long history, but I have 15 minutes, so I'll give you the modern day history of accountability. Back in 2002, the No Child Left Behind Act was passed. It was a wholly bipartisan effort because we realized we were having a crisis with education in our country. We were making nominal progress in improving outcomes for students in reading and math. So Congress got together and decided that they were going to require all states to have a common set of standards of what students should know and be able to do in the core subject areas. States got to decide what the standards were, but they had to be challenging academic standards. And the US Department of Education reviewed them to make sure they were so. The state also was required to develop assessments to measure whether or not students had mastered those standards. States were allowed to develop their own assessments, but they had to be at least in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school for reading and math. It had to be administered at least once per grade span in science, so once in elementary, middle, and high. States had to create these tests and get final approval from the federal government on whether or not those tests were adequate. The federal government also set goals for states for student improvement. They said that 100% of kids had to be proficient by 2012. When I was working in Florida on this assessment plan, I was like, 2012, that's forever from now. We'll have no problem doing that. Well, time passes and states didn't reach those expectations, but there was a very concerted focus to make sure we were moving kids towards proficiency and mastering those state content standards that we set out for them. We also had the federal government require schools be accountable for adequate yearly progress, or AYP. This was, were students moving towards proficiency? So were they meeting their goals towards 100% proficiency in reading and math? And were they graduating within 4 years with a standard high school diploma? They also prescribed a series of supports and interventions. What did schools and districts need to do if they weren't meeting their academic targets for students? It was very specific. They first had to start providing supplemental educational services, which looked like before and after school tutoring, additional dosage of reading during the school day, so extra supports for students. Those continued to progress, ultimately ending after 6 years of not meeting adequate yearly progress an opportunity for closure or state takeover. So those were very specific. If you're going to have a system of accountability, you have to expect actions that go with it. Federal government was very prescriptive under President Bush's No Child Left Behind Act, but was a very bipartisan effort. For all the people that folly and say, wasn't that great of a thing? It was the first time ever states had comparable data on student performance disaggregated by student group ever in the state, in any of the states. So it did provide us a lot more information to make better decisions in how we educate students. As reauthorization came and went and never really happened, they realized that by 2012, we weren't going to reach 100% proficiency. So they started providing waivers to states, allowing states to add a growth component to their school accountability system until we could get NCLB reauthorized. So we started seeing some flexibilities and maybe a little bit of lowering expectations as we moved into the later years of NCLB. By December of 2015, Congress finally got their work done and passed the Every Student Succeeds Act. This was a major shift of authority from federal government requirements to state opportunities to act. So states still had to create their content standards. They had to be challenging, college and career aligned, and they had to be approved by the U.S. Department of Education. The testing requirements still remained, grades 3 through 8, reading and math, and high school, once in science for each level. These tests had to be criterion reference tests to measure whether or not students had mastered the standards. Where things started getting really fuzzy was there was no longer a requirement that 100% of kids had to be proficient. States set their own goals. Some states set good goals. Some states didn't set very high goals. School accountability also was opened up to go beyond the core academic subjects. States could add other indicators that maybe weren't necessarily related to academics or direct student outputs. And so school accountability systems had less and less focus on reading and math. Supports and interventions were left up to the states to decide what or if they should do anything. Only for comprehensive support schools or those lowest performing schools were states required to intervene. Districts were left to their own devices to figure out what was best to improve student outcomes. So the Obama administration and Biden administrations really pushed to have more devolution of authority down to the state level. Sounds like a good thing, but not all states are good actors. Told I can move this microphone is the whole point. I really like numbers. So you're going to be inundated with numbers for just a little bit. This is national data. Dr. Evans referenced the National Assessment for Educational Progress. It's a national assessment that's required to be given in states every other year. You do so in return for your Title I dollars. So this is why we started with No Child Left Behind. We saw some minor improvements in 4th grade math. We weren't really moving too quick. Some decreases in reading. This is where we got Reading First kicked off. If you remember the initial Reading First Science of Reading push back in 2001. Under NCLB, when we had that focus of 100% proficiency, focused on reading math and made sure that we got kids to graduate within 4 years, we saw extraordinary improvements in how many students actually achieved proficiency and how much improvement we had in student outcomes. 10 points equals about a full grade level. So our nation on a whole, students in 4th grade math were more than 2 grade levels ahead of their peers just a decade previous. Huge improvements. Not only that, but we narrowed the achievement gap. We see that with 1.5 grade levels of improvement for white students compared to more than 2 grade levels of improvement for Black, Hispanic, and free and reduced price lunch students. So that clear focus and very high set of expectations really made a huge difference. We started to implement waivers here, adding a bunch of things to our school accountability system not directly related to student outcomes. And we all of a sudden get this stagnation. states started having lesser expectations for kids, included growth measures that weren't very rigorous and didn't lead to proficiency, added a bunch of input indicators. Things really didn't go so well across the nation for students. COVID made things even worse. The crisis we're having right now with student outcomes is not a result of COVID. It certainly made it worse, but we had been declining or stagnant for the decade prior to that. Same trends really appear in 8th grade. They're not as big or pronounced. We had a much bigger decline in 8th grade scores as soon as we started implementing and setting some lower expectations for students through our accountability systems, and had pretty severe outcomes post-COVID for 8th grade students as well. Keep in mind this column when I go to the next slide. Mississippi took a very different approach when waivers and ESSA came about. When Mississippi was starting to implement their school accountability system, as Dr. Evans had mentioned, we were 50th in the country, or 49th. Instead of adding a whole bunch of extra indicators and low expectations, Mississippi doubled down on what they were doing. They had a very rigorous expectation for proficiency. They closed the honesty gap between the state assessment and NAEP assessment, so they were telling us roughly the same thing. They maintained a high expectation for 4-year graduation rates. And you can see, while everyone else in the nation was stagnant or growing down, Mississippi improved by at least a grade level when everyone else across the country was flat. This is one of the huge things that Mississippi did that no other state did, was be very serious about high expectations for all students and making no excuses for low student performance. Huge improvements here. We did see a dip, just like
I'm sorry, can you repeat what you just said? High expectations and no excuses. What'd you just say?
Yes, Mississippi took an attitude of high expectations for all students and no excuses for low performance. That attitude has improved student outcomes in Mississippi significantly, making it the envy of the state of Minnesota and many others across the country. COVID-19 did a number on Mississippi just like everybody else, but it wasn't as bad as what we saw in the rest of the country. So even though you did dip, it wasn't as significant as what we saw. And the good news is, since you started the reforms, you're still a grade level ahead of where you were more than a decade ago, even with COVID. So the improvements and the things that you have done and the hard work that you have committed to has made a huge impact for all of the students in your state and what your workforce is turning into now. Same type of thing we're seeing in 8th grade, but it's not as good of a result. We did get some improvements, definitely during ESSA, maintaining those high standards and expectations in 8th grade, but not all of those 4th grade improvements and high performance have translated over to 8th grade. So looking more towards a focus of making sure we're extending all of those literacy policies up through upper elementary and into middle school is important, making sure that we don't lower expectations for what it means to be proficient or what it means for schools to earn A's and B's. So we are having some success with 8th grade, but just not as much. One of the other things I want to point out with this is, even though we are improving in rankings, we were 50th in Mississippi in 2011 for 8th grade reading. We're 41 now. We improved 9 places. Sounds good, but we're performing worse than what we did before. The reason our rankings have improved is because Mississippi hasn't declined as much as everyone else, but this still is not a good story for our students. We're still behind our peers or their 2011 peers from where we started. So want to make sure that we can look at rankings and we look like we're moving up, and that's a good thing. But again, it's compared to other states that haven't been making as many improvements. And then the other thing I want to point out too is you hear a lot about this. Mississippi's demographics aren't necessarily representative of demographics across the country. Mississippi does have high percentages of free and reduced price lunch students, specifically Black students, Hispanic students. And so although Mississippi ranks 9th overall in 4th grade reading, they're ranked 1st and 3rd for free and reduced price lunch and Hispanic students, and 3rd for Black students. This means there is no better state for a low income or student of color to be in than Mississippi if you want to teach kids how to read. So it's amazing. You need to applaud yourself and continue the rigorous, strong work. The commitments, financial commitments, policy commitments, and expectation commitments you've made to kids has been extraordinary. So why do we have accountability? Well, because we want to see improvements in student outcomes, because we want to grow our state's economy, because we want to have better social opportunities and better communities in our state. So we really need to focus on making sure we have a strong emphasis on what students know and should be able to do, make sure those standards and expectations are high expectations and aligned to college and career. We have to measure whether or not they're meeting those standards and fairly report that, having high expectations for what it means to be on grade level and proficient. Be very rigorous in your accountability system. Schools need to be held to the highest standard to make sure students get the quality education they deserve. And then we need to report this information out very transparently so parents, the public, you policymakers understand what it means so you can take action with it. And then most importantly, we need to provide those supports and interventions so students do get the education that they deserve and aren't sold short. You know, we're really here to protect the taxpayer investment, make sure that kids are reaching their full potential, and really prompt those supports and improvement. So this is all detail we don't need to talk about. Differences in NCLB versus ESSA. If you want to talk about any of these details, more than happy to share them afterwards. But I'm really excited to get started on the fireside chat we're going to have with both Paula and Wendy. They have been doing a lot of the implementation work with the team at MDE to make sure students are getting the quality education they deserve here in the state. So Paula and Wendy, we're going to start talking about academic standards first. Like I said, academic standards are what students are supposed to know and be able to do at each grade and subjects. Educators are very engaged and involved in the process of setting what those expectations are. And Mississippi, like many other states, adopted Common Core back around 2010, started testing the Common Core standards in 14-15. Prior to that, though, Fordham Institute had done a study of the standards, pre-Common Core. And I know that's a dirty word and I still say it. So if it's on tape, don't Common Core. But they had rated Mississippi math standards as about mediocre, but the reading standards were some of the worst in the nation. And so we really want to know and talk about, Paula and Wendy, what have y'all done to improve the rigor of the standards for academic content standards here in the state of Mississippi?
Thank you, Christy. Actually, I joined the department around 2015, and that is when we began an effort surveying and convening stakeholders, teachers, parents, institutions of higher learning, representatives from there, to look at our academic standards. And we recognized that if we were going to make an academic impact in our state, that we were going to have to increase the rigor of these standards. It's pretty scary to teachers to go through that process, but they knew that it was the right thing for our children. And so we worked on creating a set of standards for ELA and mathematics, and we refer to those as the Mississippi College and Career Readiness Standards. We developed those. They were fully implemented in the classrooms in 2017, and we spent 2016 as well as every year thereafter helping our teachers prepare for teaching these rigorous standards. And the way we do that is through professional development, providing our teachers with the high quality instructional materials they need in order to introduce and help our students become, academically, successful. And also, I want to point out that in 2018, during this time of implementation, the Mississippi Department of Education also revised our early learning standards from birth to 4 years old. And we aligned those vertically so that they aligned very well with the K-12 standards. So we created this continuum of not just a piecemeal approach, but the fact that we will begin with our 4-year-olds and that there will be an alignment until they reach the 12th grade and graduate from high school. Um, I'll give you an example. One of the things, I know she referred to reading, but in the previous standards, prior to the Mississippi College and Career Readiness Standards, one of the kindergarten math standards was students should have the ability and be able to count 1 to 10. In the Mississippi College and Career Readiness Standards, that standard was changed, and we work with our kindergartners, and they leave kindergarten counting 1 to 100. It's just the idea that if we challenge our students and we equip our teachers, our students can do that. They can meet those higher standards, and they have.
So following the adoption of,
You need to go one more.
my apologies. So following the adoption and the implementation of the more rigorous standards and increasing the expectations for students, the MDE collaborated with teachers across our state to develop our new Mississippi statewide assessment system. Those assessments were first administered in the spring of 2016. Excuse me. And these new standards, so we have the standards, now we have a rigorous assessment aligned to those standards. And so our new statewide assessment system was the beginning following the standards of the reform that we see in Mississippi that increase the rigor that allows us to compare our students and compete on a national level and improve student outcomes for all Mississippi students.
So during the same time, Mississippi also enacted 3 major education reforms to help raise student achievement. We're going to talk about my favorite one first, A through F school accountability. Mississippi has become nationally recognized for their accountability model and this model has been replicated in other states. Your neighbor to the west, Louisiana, took what you all have done, put it in place in their state. It's going into effect this year. They're gunning for you. They saw what Mississippi did and they're like, we can do that too. We're right next door. So be ready. And they really are looking to drive continuous improvement like you've done here. Can you talk about the system components a little bit, particularly the emphasis on measuring the success of some of the lowest performing students in the state?
Yeah, so as you all know, our major education reform efforts began in 2012 in Mississippi. And that is when we established the A through F accountability system. And that was one of our greatest, as you've heard throughout the conversation already this morning, reform strategies. The A through F accountability system has been crucial in driving student outcomes in the state of Mississippi. Within that system, students perform on statewide assessments. We have graduation rates. We have advanced placement, dual credit outcomes, a number of components that feed into that system so that schools and districts receive annually an assignment of an A through F on the scale. What makes our system different than many systems in other states is the heavy emphasis that we place on growth, particularly for those students that are identified in the lowest 25% of performance. So the focus on growth means that every school, no matter where they start on the scale, if they prepare students they can make progress and earn a higher grade if they help those lower performing students make the progress needed to meet that growth measure. As you all know, accountability systems are designed to drive the behaviors that we want to see in students. When we implemented this current system, many high schools were not even offering one AP course to any student, although it was already required in policy. But as you know and can tell, that's a huge equity issue. And we know that what gets measured matters. So although these students were being denied access to those courses, once it was included in the accountability system, we began to see more emphasis. We applied more weight to AP courses in the model. So in no time, our AP participation and performance more than doubled across the state. Because our school districts are self-governing, our accountability system has been central to the work that schools and districts are doing to help them improve. When we first implemented this A through F accountability system, less than 2/3 of the schools in Mississippi were rated a C or higher. Today, 80% of all schools in Mississippi are rated a C or higher, and 87% of our districts have achieved a grade of an A, B, or C. As you may know, our accountability system was recently revised to include measures of to advance student achievement and to measure college and career readiness. So if you know and are familiar with the components of our system, we've taken the college and career readiness component and the acceleration component and taken those out and blended them together and combined them to be the new Mississippi Readiness Index. We're also currently in the process of resetting the standards for what it means to have an A through an F in a school or district. And we want to increase the goal and have students work for districts and schools work to increase the number of students that are scoring proficient and advanced on our statewide assessments. The updated standards that we're working on will eliminate the current norm referenced standard that we have that gives a forced distribution of the number of A through F schools or districts that we have. So we are working toward a hybrid approach that would combine both a normed and criterion reference standard in that process. Just as a reminder, I know you all know that the state law that was passed for the A through F accountability system directed or indicated that when 75% of all students were proficient, or when 65% of the schools or districts earned a grade of a B or higher, then those standards should be reset. So it's been over a decade, but we're there now, and that's the process that we're currently working through.
And when will the new model be released? Is that coming out before the year's end, or is it?
Yes, sir. The revisions that were made to the model are being implemented this current school year. So the grades that were just released in September, they did not include the new readiness index, but those that will be released a year from now in September of 26 will include that. So districts are familiar with the revisions that have been made and are working to implement those now. And the new standards that are being set will be applied in September of 26
So
as well.
the new standards probably be more rigorous and more, can we anticipate scores going up or down based on the new model that's coming out?
So honestly, in my opinion, I think we should expect to see less number of A's schools or B schools in this, because the goal of the accountability system is to continue to raise expectations so that we increase those proficiency rates. So still in that process. We don't know exactly what those standards will look like, but I do expect the expectations to.
Well, the new
increase.
model, you talked about AP. I don't want to get into the model specifically, but a lot of students are doing dual credit and so forth. Is that going to be part of the new
Yes,
model as well?
Yes, sir. So
Okay.
all of the components that were in the College and Career Readiness Index, such as the work keys and the ACT, and then in the acceleration component, we have industry certification, we have IB, we have some of the Cambridge assessments, we have dual credit, and AP, those remain. We are in that model recognizing more students that score, so as an example, in the previous model, if a student earned a silver on a work keys, you had to pair that with an industry certification or a 2-year completer pathway to get the full credit. So we will acknowledge and assign credit to students. It's like maybe a half a point that achieve silver, because that's what the industry in Mississippi desires a student to have as a silver
Okay.
on that. So all of that is there. We've added the ASVAB. So the goal of the readiness index on the achievement or acceleration or the assessment portion is whether a student intends to enroll in college or seek employment or enlist in the military. All of those assessments, achievement indicators around those 3 areas are recognized in the new readiness index. So it's an expansion, I
Right.
would say.
Is this model something you've already got drafted? Is that something you could provide the committee?
Yes, sir. We
Like
would be.
tomorrow or
Yes,
later-
sir. We
later
do, the one pager that indicates the components and the points assigned to that component. We'll be happy to share that with you.
Thank
It
you.
primarily changes for schools with grades 12 and districts. The 700-point school or the elementary middle schools did not change, but we'll be happy to
Okay.
provide those new
Thank you.
diagrams.
So as most of you probably know, but we'll reiterate because it's pretty cool. MDE has an accountability task force. I've had the pleasure of serving on this task force since 2012. They bring together national experts, a couple of us, and basically educators and leaders in Mississippi schools and districts around the state. It's about 25 of us that sit on the task force, convene on a very regular basis, talk about all of the questions that you have here, are very diligent in debate and discussion to make recommendations to the board about what needs to be changed, improved, increased in rigor. So it's pretty unique to Mississippi. They've been doing it the longest of any state. A couple of states have followed their pattern, but having that educator involvement like right from the beginning and onset's really pretty cool. I do have some questions, how do districts after, we make these decisions, they go to the state board, they get implemented, how are they responding to the accountability system and what kind of impact are they seeing as a result of this data?
So the first thing I like to say is the power of data cannot be underestimated. I know we will inundate you today and tomorrow with data, but it indicates the improved, the outcomes that we are seeing. Just have to be honest, assessment and accountability systems are not universally popular when it comes to being held accountable for a variety of reasons. And the thing that we hear most from district leaders is just the fact is that they don't mind being held accountable, but the issue becomes being held accountable for something that they have no control over. And that those outside factors that impact student outcomes, whether it's coming to school or, engaging in activities if they are in school is oftentimes beyond their control. And we understand those concerns, but as I stated earlier, what gets measured gets done. So before Mississippi included graduation rate in our accountability system, only 3/4 of students were graduating on time. And Wendy will talk a little bit about graduation rate shortly. Before we started looking at the progress of those lower performing students in that bottom 25%, growth was stagnant, and our growth was being masked by those students that were earning proficient and advanced scores on the assessments. In Dr. Evans' opening remarks, he referenced that significant honesty gap that we had a number of years ago when we look at the proficiency rates on our statewide assessments and compare those on our statewide assessments. So we we believe that at that time, that Mississippi thought that our proficiency rates for our students, if you looked at how they were performing on our assessments, was about 75%. But in all honesty, we were about 25% when we had that. So the gap, as Dr. Evans alluded to, was significant. And so without all of the research and the data that we constantly provide, we would be unable to drive and improve academic outcomes for all students in our state. And we use data to inform every decision that we make before we change a policy, before we make any recommendations to the board. We consider the research and we consider the data. So our state plan to meet requirements of the Every Student Succeed Act is grounded in the research and those specific goals and targets that we have to close our achievement gaps with our subgroups.
So as Paula alluded to, Mississippi and our districts have demonstrated consistent and measurable improvement in our four-year graduation rate. In 2013, again, we had a graduation rate of 75%, 74.5%. By 2024, we are at 89.2%, surpassing the national average, which is at 87%. And, this upward trajectory reflects one of the most significant gains in the nation as it relates to graduation rates. And it really does, in my opinion, highlights the state's continued focus on student achievement and readiness for post-secondary experiences, whatever that might be for the individual child. We're asked all the time, what factors contributed to this? What do you believe or what do you know contributed to these successes? And so not necessarily an exhausted list, but some things that we look at the data and we believe wholeheartedly has made an impact here for student success is early literacy and foundational skill development. Implementation of the Early Learning Collaborative Act, Literacy-Based Promotion Act, aligning supports, basically that strengthens students' reading proficiency. We believe that has a huge impact on students' retention, and as my father used to say, sticking it out. That's hugely important and cannot be understated. We also have expanded access to college and career readiness pathways, and we've done that in various ways, but three of the most important, and you talked about this earlier, is advanced placement opportunities for students, dual credit opportunities for students, and career and technical education pathway experiences for students. And what we tried to do at the high school level, middle and high school level, is really make relevant what the students are doing in the classroom to what it is that they may want to do as they leave high school and step into a post-secondary experience. And I think that has made a huge impact on keeping students in our schools and being successful completers of high school. We have data-driven support and intervention systems for at-risk students, looking at the data, monitoring students, and targeting any factors that would put them at risk has been hugely important. Every student has to have a reason to come to school and has to have a reason to complete. And so just looking at every student individually and trying to determine what are those factors that might cause that child to be at risk of not graduating. And then I think also professional learning and instructional supports. We have had a statewide emphasis on high quality instruction, making sure that the standards are high, but also that the curriculum aligns with those high standards. And then quite honestly, effective teaching practices. When we boil it all down, our teachers are in the classrooms with our students. They are boots on the ground, and they're the ones who assure that these students are acquiring the knowledge and skills that they need to be successful.
I interrupt for one just second.
go
I
ahead.
think we have some questions over here. Like Senator Hobson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wendy, I'll start with this question on the graduation rates. Is that an objective? Have objective standards been used all along in that process? So that the graduation rate, I mean, I've heard people say, well, you could quote unquote dumb it down to allow kids to graduate, but that's not the case, is it?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, we're measuring by the standard 4-year federally defined or cohort. Now, we did have COVID waivers.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
And we do have, I mean, years, 2014, I think was the first year that we had an option in lieu of passing an assessment because we had the 4 end of course assessments that were required for a student to pass in order to earn a diploma. And those assessments have been barriers over time to some students earning a diploma. So in 2014-15 school year was the first time that we introduced an option in lieu of. And so we have added options. So there's multiple options for a student. And that has definitely improved our graduation rate. But looking back, we're still today only one of a few states that have high stakes graduation end of course assessments.
Okay, so it's relative, so the numbers we're looking at here, where we have an 89.2% graduation rate and the national average, it looks like it's a year behind, maybe year or two, but it's at 86.6. Our graduation rates in Mississippi based on an objective national standard exceed the nation. Is that correct? Am I correct? And looking back at your slide 14, Paula, we've gone in the school level 62% to 80% in A, B, and C school districts, and district-wide 62 to 87%. Those are objective standards too, correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's not based on,
Same standards, all schools, all districts.
again, I
Defined
think I'm asking these questions more to debunk the statements that we've dumbed it down in some ways. And I think our 4th grade and even 8th grade results show that we haven't dumbed it down. We're competing nationally. And I see, is it Christy? Is that right? I see Christy nodding her head in the back. That's one of the things that we hear, unfortunately, sometimes is, well, they're just letting the kids go along, but that's not borne out by the statistics, is it?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think Senator McClendon, do you have a question? You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike McClendon from DeSoto County. With the neighboring school district that we have north of us is a little needs improvement in Shelby County. We get a lot of transfers that come in, especially the Horn Lake, South Haven, Olive Branch schools. And those children are not up to the level that those that started in DeSoto County schools. Are those numbers included in our numbers? Will they not be, do you get a chance to get those kids up to par, or?
Yeah.
It's automatically, you're deemed, because those children haven't had the start that our kids have had in DeSoto County? Will that be part of the new accountability model? I guess is my question.
No changes around the transfer students. Once a student transfers into your district, then that district has ownership of that student and is responsible for improving outcomes for that student.
But remember, you have a full academic year. Students who aren't there for a full academic year aren't included. So you have at least one entire school year to.
And that's why you have the growth component as well. So you get those kids coming from Shelby County that aren't doing as well, but then they do the next year, they improve, the growth factor component will show up for am I correct in making that statement?
Chrissy made a good point. The business rules do account for
Yeah.
if that student has not been enrolled in your school for a full academic year as defined, then they're excluded that year, but you are held accountable for them moving forward.
moving forward. Okay. Senator Boyd, I think had a question before I recognize Senator Hobson.
Kind of piggybacking a little bit on what Senator Hobson said, a number of us were in a meeting the other day where it was suggested that we do away with testing on a number of levels. You today have testified that Mississippi is recognized for our accountability system. And Dr. Vanderburg, you have a statement that I've heard you repeat over and over again: what gets measured matters, and that's what's valued. Can you kind of expand on what you said about our accountability system and the importance of helping us achieve excellence in education?
Yes, ma'am. If you look at the components that comprise our accountability system, and Senator DeBarra, Chairman DeBarra, I apologize for not including that today, but you would see on 1,000-point high school or district that the majority of those components that are included are based on outcomes on our statewide assessments. So without the data that we obtain from student assessments, we would not be able to measure students' proficiency rates in ELA, math, and science. We know U.S. history is no longer included. We wouldn't be able to measure a student's growth in ELA and math, or the growth of the lowest 25% of those students. And then graduation rate is 20%. It's a 200-point component. And then we measure EL progress on an assessment that's specifically designed for English language learners. So without the assessments and the data that we obtain from those assessments, we would not be able to have an accountability system.
Senator Hobson.
One more question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One more question. As it relates to the new accountability model or the new standards that we have for our students, obviously the school districts know this, and hopefully parents and everybody involved knows that our standards are going up, which, by the way, I think is great. I think we continue to ramp up the rigor. It's going to help Mississippi and help our students do better in the world. What efforts are being made to ensure that everybody knows, not just from a public announcement standpoint, but also their what's being done, if you can just summarize it, within the curriculum or the districts to help these students get up to speed on this increased rigor?
So I'll let Wendy take the question on what's going on in the classroom, but I say a number of times, I mean, when the reform started in 12 and 13, you, the Senate, and the House, of course, had foresight that at some point we were going to reach the goals that were outlined in law, with the 75% of the students being proficient, or the schools or district at 65%. So in all honesty, and many of you know, we reached that 65% threshold of schools being rated an A or a B a couple of years ago. But we had a number of things. We still had some changes in the business rules from the COVID impact, and some changes that were made there. So we lost a little bit of comparability, in the system with some of the waivers. We also had these efforts to incorporate and acknowledge more workforce development per se that was folded into the Mississippi Readiness Index. So we spoke to the leadership of the House and the Senate and to the Lieutenant Governor's office and the Governor's office and said, look, it just doesn't really make sense for us to change the standards now when we have all of this in place, and have to come back and go through the standard setting process again in the near future. So the law has always said we were going to increase the rigor and increase the standards for the last 12 years. Districts have known that, but we've particularly had conversations around it the last couple of years within the Accountability Task Force and what that might look like. And some of the primary conversations that we've had with many of you and with many members of the House is the way the standards are now, the norm referenced, it doesn't take into consideration criteria that would allow a C district. So we know that a C district is an average district or a successful district, as point of the A through F system being simple and easy for the public to understand. But in this process, we've had some C districts that may have proficiency rates in ELA and math of less than 20%. And so when we look at a goal of 75% that's defined in state law for proficiency for all students, and we look at our state, consolidated state plan with a goal of 70% proficiency for all students, then we just kind of raise our eyebrow. Is 20% proficiency in ELA and math in a C school district or school appropriate? So that's why we brought in the conversations of making the, having the standards be more rigorous, to not only have that norm reference component, but to also bring in some additional criteria. So to answer your question, everyone is well aware. We've talked about it for the last couple of years ad nauseum, to be honest with you, about being at this point. But now Wendy could share the things that are going on in the classrooms that would prepare for the more rigorous.
Yeah, I would boil it down to a few things. We offer statewide training. And what's very interesting is we're having more districts reach out to us about some of our statewide training, because they understand that there is going to be a push for proficiency. And so as a result of that, they're wanting to get their teachers trained to ensure that they do the best that they can do with students. Our coaching model, we continue to employ that coaching model, not only in literacy, but in early childhood as well as mathematics. We have some coaching in leadership. We have coaching also in special education. So that coaching model that really is designed to serve our lowest performing schools, based on the data that Dr. Vanderford mentioned. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say high quality instructional material. In the last, I would say 8-10 years, we have moved from the old textbook adoption protocol, and really dug in and looked at these materials to determine, if you say they're going to meet 75% of the standards, well, I can pick and choose through a textbook and find 75%. But that's not what we're doing anymore. We're looking to see 100%. We're looking at rigor. We're looking at quality tier 1 instruction, good classroom instruction. And we're encouraging districts to adopt these materials. I will say that we are approximately at 90% of all of our K-8 schools in ELA have adopted a high quality instructional material. And it makes a difference for our students. And we have a video here in just a few minutes. I'm going to show you more about that. And then the last thing I mentioned, quality tier 1 instruction, nothing takes the place of good classroom instruction. However, we do want to have identification of students that have needs and offer early intervention for those. Okay. And I think all of those things are helping our schools meet the rigor that we're implementing. We're just kind of ramping up these particular things.
Quick question. I don't know if you know this, mentioned this before, but down at the very bottom of that slide, it says we've almost tripled our graduation rate for children with disabilities. That's amazing. Can you
Yes, sir.
explain how that happened? I know 65% it's still not good enough, but it's
No.
drastically improved since 2013. What's been done to increase that graduation rate for that cohort?
I believe it's a combination of things. I believe that we have provided for our students with disabilities a much more inclusive experience. And I think that has made a huge difference for those students. I think we have done a better job at identifying specific services that these students need to be successful. And to be honest with you, we're just looking more at subgroups now, you know? I mean, I know that I was a former principal of a large, well, it's a 7A school now, 6A school, and we would laud all of our 30+ club kids, you know, with posters and stuff. They'd made a 30+ on the ACT, and that's incredible. And so when we'd get our data back, we were so proud of ourselves and patting ourselves on the back. But when you really dug into the subgroups, that's when you have a problem. And I think that's what we're doing now is we're facing that, you know? And as a result of that, you see success for these subgroups. So, and again, you mentioned this, 65.2% is not nearly enough. Okay. And actually, the final part of what I was going to say about the graduation rates is that we recognize that although the data looks great, we still have room for improvement, particularly with our most at-risk and vulnerable populations.
Senator Wiggins has a question, if you don't mind.
Thank you. I'm gonna take us kind of veer off of just a tad, but I think one of the best comments I heard was you said Mississippi, if you're in the lower echelon child, Mississippi is the place to be because we're number one in the there's no better state than that, right? Okay. And on my question, correct me if I'm wrong, and please dispel me of this notion, but it's been my observations and all that when it comes to high performing students, gifted students, that we haven't done as much for our gifted students. Now, in terms of dispelling things, what I hear is, oh, well, they're gifted, they're going to succeed anyway. But the reality is I want our students to compete with every state, with the kids going to Columbia, to UVA, although Senator Bryan, we credit him for leading the pack on that. But for UVA and knowing that we have that. And what I tend to hear is that the rigor for our advanced students is not there. I've had students come back and tell me, you know what, I went, and these are people like valedictorians, they go somewhere else and they're like, oh, wow, there's Thomas Jefferson High School in Fairfax, Virginia, that is, I think, ranked the #1 school in the country. As a personal comment, my nephew attends Benjamin Franklin High School in New Orleans, which is like #2 in the country or something like that. And he's looking at competing way other places. So my question is, what can we do to get those and focus on those folks so that not only are we competing at the lower level, and I'm just paraphrasing, to compete with our incredibly academically gifted students, that when they go out to compete on a national and international basis, people are going, that kid came from Mississippi.
That's a great question. I would say there's a couple of things that we are doing or that we could do. And I know Dr. Evans is going to shoot me a look, but I think, you know, we talk about dual credit opportunities, we talk about advanced placement opportunities. And I think, you know, sometimes we err on the side of taking sides as to which is better. But as a high school principal, I always talk to my students about if you know the field that you're going to go into when you graduate from high school, I would deploy you to take at least one AP course in that field. So if you're going into science, take a biology or take a AP, you know, if you're doing math, take an AP calculus course. Because for me, I think that that is the measure. Okay. Students who take AP courses and are successful in those courses, quite honestly, even if they're not successful, I mean, I had kids take AP class and they'd make a C in it, but they were far better off and more prepared and on a level to compete with any of their peers when they went on to a post-secondary experience. So I think that's one thing. I really do.
Okay, let me comment. If that's the standard, which I would think is great, I've heard of districts and others who steer kids away from taking AP. be it cost, be it we don't have the teachers, be
Yeah.
it we don't have this or that.
That's,
And to the point that was made earlier about in the other ones, we got rid of excuses.
Mhm.
Seems to me we got to get rid of excuses when it comes to that.
Yeah, well, we have removed, we were one of the only states in the nation who required our teachers who taught advanced placement to have an add-on endorsement. And we had that requirement for about 10 years. And speaking of data, we began to assess our data over a 10-year period, and we realized that our AP scores were flat. We were having no positive result of that. So we have removed that endorsement barrier. So a student, a teacher who wants to teach AP Lit or AP Lang, all they need is the 154 English endorsement. Okay. And then they can receive professional development. I will also tell you that the College Board's done a really good job of online resources for these teachers. If I were an AP teacher now, I would have a plethora of resources that assist me in teaching it. So I believe we as a state have removed that excuse and that barrier to providing those options for students. And not only that, but I believe that we have an online option of just almost every AP course that we have in our course code manual.
What about I'm going to use the term excuses from districts and all that steer their kids away from taking that because of cost or something else?
Yeah, I get it. And like I said, I think what has happened over the last several years is we've kind of chosen, we're either a dual credit or we're an AP school. And here's the bottom line, students need both. If you've got a student who knows they're going up the road to Mississippi State and they want to get 12 hours of dual credit, okay. But if you've got a student who's dead set that they're going to an out-of-state school and they know that they want to go into the medical field, to be honest with you, dual credit may be okay for that child, but it may not be. Advanced placement might be more appropriate for that child. And I think that's what we have. That's the challenge, is to recognize that one's not better than the other, but one may be more appropriate for a student or a group of students based on what it is that they want to do in their post-secondary experience. Okay. So it's not, to me, it's not an either or. I don't have a problem with dual credit. Okay. But it's what is the most appropriate pathway and course for that child. You're welcome. Come on.
All right.
Okay.
So I love the conversation about data, love the high expectations and no excuses. Obviously, right after the reform started, all the way back in 2013, y'all were looking at and acknowledging data, and passed two major laws, specifically the Early Learning Collaborative Act, which established the first state-funded pre-K program, and the Literacy-Based Promotion Act for reading instruction, for a major focus on kindergarten through grade 3. Can you talk about how these laws impacted students?
Yeah. The one thing that I would say is that the Mississippi legislature at that time took a bold step. And when I say bold, I'm talking a bold step when they enacted these two pieces of legislation. And I believe, and I think the data supports it, that his has changed the future of education in our state. And those two, of course, is Early Learning Collaborative Act, which enables us to open pre-K programs in underserved areas of our state, and of course, the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. The importance of and the impact of those two pieces of legislation cannot be undersold. I mean, it is literally changed education and the face of education in our state for our students. These two laws have allowed the MDE to build dedicated offices for these, for literacy, K-3 literacy, as well as early childhood. It has allowed us to build supports and boots on the ground that are in classrooms every day with teachers, side by side, coaching them, modeling for them, leading PLCs for teachers. And I believe that that is the nature and as well as the success. Early childhood, one of the things I wanted to point out here is thanks to this investment in pre-K, 4-year-olds enrolled in public pre-K has jumped from 38% in 2014-15 to 61% in 23-24. Okay, so you're looking at the numbers of students that are involved in a pre-K program. And I think it's really important to know that in these pre-K programs, these students through a simulated play, they not only learn standards of education, but they learn to work well with others. They learn to be with their peers. They learn how to behave in social settings. And so that when they walk into that kindergarten classroom, they're better prepared for what it is that kindergarten classroom is going to provide them. Also, I would like to say, and this is pretty amazing that in 2015, the National Institute for Early Education Research identified Mississippi as one of 5 states that met all 10 of the criteria or their quality standards. And since 2015, we have been recognized as meeting all 10 of those standards in every subsequent year. Okay. So what I want to say to you is not just the volume, it's the quality. And I think that's important to understand. You know, yes, we have more students involved in pre-K programs, but the programs that they're involved in, it's making a difference. So as far as Literacy-Based Promotion Act, this slide shows all of the components of what we have built out at the Mississippi Department of Education as a result of the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. And in one, it's like all of these are part of a working system. And if one of them is a weak link, then it really does impact the whole system. I want to focus mainly on educator training, again, the high quality instructional materials and the coaching. Those are the 3 areas that I believe has made the greatest impact for our students. I've talked about the professional development. The one thing I always tell folks is our coaching model is not to work directly with students. Our whole coaching model is about building the capacity of teachers. Okay. We want to make sure that we go in and we work with teachers and we assist those teachers, that we walk away, value is added and they can be in the classroom with the students delivering the same high quality instruction. So our models are around building capacity of teachers. The other thing I wanted to say that in the Office of Early Childhood in 2018, we received a grant that allowed us also to build a coaching model or coaching program. And we've grown that out. And so through coaching and family engagement, we have seen steady, measurable growth in both of those areas. And then I was going to comment that, you know, I think it was talked about earlier, other states talk about this Mississippi Miracle. And in Mississippi, we like to refer to it as a marathon because the real progress that we're making is not a sprint. It is intentional, it's steady, it's consistent, and it's built on teamwork. So At this, one of our key professional development practices is what we call the science of reading. And so I want to show you a video that illustrates a little bit of that and the impact that it's had on our state.
Understand how they look to read. It gives them a better practice approach for teaching literacy. It's called structured literacy. The simple view of reading shows that reading is a problem in school practice. Decoding and language comprehension together, these skills determine how we will understand what they read. And Mississippi supports the science of reading. The Mississippi Department of Education offers statewide professional development and compliance reading, along with rigorous training focusing on implementation of high-quality instruction and grounded. Our goal is to develop proficient readers. Students who receive clear and structured reading instruction are 2 to 3 times more likely to achieve grade level proficiency by the end of 3rd grade. With this type of instruction, we know that 95% of all students can learn to read.
So I just want to highlight that the funding that you guys have provided is it fuels coaching, and coaching fuels achievement. And we really do feel like that's how we've reached this milestone. And then when we talk to you in the morning, we're going to talk with you a little teaser. We're going to talk to you a little bit about adolescent literacy and how we can work to expand the success that we've had in our K-3 literacy program.
So early on with the passage of the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, there was a lot of fear and conversations about the number of 3rd graders that would not pass the assessment and would not be promoted to the 4th grade. And the question of how schools would manage the number of students that may not be promoted as a result of the assessment. Well, that didn't come true. In the spring of 2015, the first year that the test was administered, we had 85% of the students pass the 3rd grade reading gate on their first attempt. There was a technical amendment in 2016 that raised the bar for students and increased the requirement for them to pass to the 4th grade. So after that bar was raised in 2019, 75% of the students passed on their first attempt. And then the final pass rate that first year was at 86%. This past spring, we were able to report that we have a record high of 77.3% of all 3rd graders that passed the test on the first attempt. So as you know, students that do not pass on the first attempt, they have 2 retest opportunities. Then there's an opportunity for them to be promoted to the 4th grade when their writing component of the 3rd grade ELA assessment is combined with the reading assessment. And then, of course, there are multiple good cause exemptions that are outlined in state law. So it's not that we have the difference in the 77% that are retained. There are other measures and opportunities for students to be promoted.
I'm kind of disappointed I have to ask this question because I'd just rather answer it on my own. But you've seen from Dr. Evans and some PowerPoint slides that we've provided on NAEP. Can you talk about Mississippi's progress specifically on the state assessment as well as the NAEP assessment and how these 2 programs validate each other?
Yes, and feel free to chime in on anything that I might miss. I will say that one thing that many of the national experts that are involved in our work in Mississippi Christie being one of those, and many others. And even those that we come in contact with that are not involved in the work in Mississippi say that one thing that Mississippi could do better is talk about our progress on the NAEP results, that we do not tout our NAEP achievements as much as we should in comparison to our achievements on our statewide assessments. But beginning with our statewide assessments. So along with our rising literacy levels, Mississippi students have made steady gains in proficiency in ELA and math. We implemented this new statewide assessment system in the spring of 2016, as we talked about, that was aligned to the higher, more rigorous college and career readiness standards. When MAP, as we call it, the Mississippi Academic Assessment Program, MAP for short, was first administered, only 1/3 of the students met or exceeded grade level expectations in ELA and math. Now, in 24-25, the percentage of students that are scoring proficient or advanced reached 47.4% in ELA and 54.5% in math. So moving on to a little bit about our NAEP results, we've talked a lot about the reforms that were in 2012, 2013, but since 2013, our fourth graders have climbed from 49th and 50th in reading and math up to number 9 and number 16 respectively on our nation's report card. 2019, about 3 years after the implementation of the new statewide assessment system, was the first year that I recall, and many of my colleagues that were at the agency at the time will remember, we were really excited about our statewide results. We had reached the highest ever proficiency levels in ELA and math in Mississippi, and we were celebrating before the results even went to our state board. And I never will forget a technical advisory committee, which is required in federal law, but it's national experts that work with us on our assessment and accountability system. We met with them in August of 2019, and we were so excited, Dr. Wright and the rest of the assessment and accountability team, to share our results. And we just thought our national experts that were on the panel at the time were going to be so excited, and they never changed the look on their face. I was like, okay. Whatever. And so I wanted to cry at that point. I was so disappointed, but they said, let me just give you a warning. Wait till the 2019 NAEP scores come out, and that's going to be your measure on whether or not all of the reforms that you've implemented, your standards, your assessment, your accountability system, that's going to tell the story. So we waited anxiously for what seemed an eternity for our 2019 NAEP results that really gave Mississippi something to celebrate. So that's when Mississippi first gained our national attention, was in 2019 when we achieved the #1 spot in the nation for our fourth grade students. And the gains that they made were the largest gains from 2017 to 2019 in reading and math. And our 8th grade students at the time outpaced the nation for growth in math, and they held steady in reading. So at that time, Mississippi was the only state in the nation that showed significant increases in 3 of the 4 core NAEP subjects. So you can imagine the field day that we had when our technical advisory committee was back in town and we were able to talk about our state assessments as compared to the NAEP assessments. But following the pandemic and the delay in the 2021 administration of NAEP, our 2022 NAEP results showed that Mississippi had maintained its historic gain in 4th grade reading, while the scores nationally dropped in all 4 NAEP subjects and grades. Our 4th graders scored at the national average in both reading and math. However, our 8th grade dropped 3 points in reading and 8 points in math, but these drops were consistent with the national declines that were seen for both subjects. Mississippi 4th graders, they dropped 7 points in math, but that was also consistent with what we saw nationally. In 2024, Mississippi was only, was one of only 13 states with gains in fourth grade math, which is the only subject and grade nationally that showed a statistically significant improvement since the 2022 administration. So the percentage of fourth graders scoring proficient or advanced in math increased from 32% in 2022 to 38% in 2024, which is statistically tied to the 2024 national rate. According to the Urban Institute, when you adjust for the demographics that Christy talked about earlier in her presentation, Mississippi students overall scored #1 in the nation in fourth grade reading and #4 in eighth grade reading. So in summary, when you consider all the change in the results that we've had since 2013, Mississippi has the highest ever rate of students scoring proficient or advanced in all 4 tests, both fourth and eighth grade math and reading. And we're #1 in the nation for achieving the highest score increases in fourth grade reading and math since 2013. Is there anything that I missed that you would like to add?
No, that was fantastic. So y'all have done a bunch of stuff. Is there anything else, any other laws, state board policies, rules, strategies that build upon this success and these current policies?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for the question, Christy. One of the things, and Paul and I both have some examples of other policies and strategies, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about was our dyslexia screening and support. Supported legislation enacted in 2012 and 2016 to help students with dyslexia. And so currently, all Mississippi schools use a state-approved screener to identify students with dyslexia, and they administer these screenings in the spring of kindergarten as well as the fall of first grade. Again, I mentioned early intervention is key. And so this gives us an opportunity to identify students who may struggle due to dyslexia and intervene early. Also, we have the Mississippi Dyslexia Scholarship Program that provides school choice for students in grades 1 through 12 if they would have an opportunity to receive assistance there in their school district or attend a special school. I believe we currently have about 5 participating schools that are approved by MDE. Average scholarship value is about $6,600. And this, in 24-25, we had about 246 students participating in the scholarship program. And so that's significant for our students who do struggle with dyslexia.
Senator Boyd.
Y'all have done a lot of work in this arena, but at the local level, I get calls at least a couple monthly with districts that are not, when a child comes in with a dyslexia diagnosis, we've even done a state law independent of what y'all have in your policies and procedures for IDEA and 504s. But we still have districts who want to say that this is not an issue that they need to deal with, or that they need to give special assistance to a student to where that they won't even evaluate them. And some children it is a spectrum of that dyslexia. Some children actually qualify, we know, under IDEA for an IEP. We know some don't have it that severe and may only qualify for a 504. But we're still having a number of districts, even in our really best districts, working with children in this arena. What can we do to help, and how can we get this out to districts? Because this is something that is very manageable and can be remediated the earlier it gets, so that they're very high performing students, and oftentimes they're twice exceptional. So what can we do collectively to make this a better situation?
That's a great question. Actually, Dr. Evans and I and a couple of colleagues were in North Mississippi, probably been a month or so ago. And then, the North Mississippi group through, with assistance from Create and other assistants, they are offering, phenomenal services for students with dyslexia. But they will tell you that even with the investment that has been made there privately, that they still have a waiting list. And so when you put a face with a waiting list, you realize that it's problematic. But what we discussed in that meeting was we have several issues. I think probably one of the most systemic issues is having qualified, certified dyslexia therapists. The number is very low in our state. And the time and effort that it takes to get that dyslexia therapy it's very time consuming. It's very exhaustive. And so I'll give you an example. One girl who spoke there, it took her 5 years because she was working full time and trying to go through and meet all of the clinical hours to get that therapy. So I believe one of the things that we're going to really have to look at is how do we as a state get more dyslexia therapists who can offer that therapy to our students. I think that's a big barrier. Because like you mentioned before, every student who's diagnosed with dyslexia, they do not have the same needs. Okay, it's varying needs that those students have, and it's important that the therapy they do receive is based on their specific needs. And you're right, they're always going to be dyslexic, but they learn to overcome that in a successful way. And I think you had a follow up or
Yeah, and we've actually added to that 2 years ago, we added the CALC certified.
yeah.
Yes, which are very qualified to work in this arena. And we had a number of them around the state, I know, to try to help this. But it is a constant call that a lot of us
Yeah.
get. And then the other thing too, I have a question too, because our language offers a number of things where they can do different plans as opposed to a straight 504.
Mhm.
Are we causing some of the confusion in that process because of the multiple areas of which school districts can work with families on this? Do we need to have, they can be put on a plan that is not a 504 or that, but are we causing some of that confusion with the multiple different options? And that's just something I would ask y'all to look into.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
legally they are qualified for a 504,
Yep.
most of them.
Yep.
But are we causing that because of some of the other language that we put in, really trying to help this a number of years ago?
Yeah, that's something, Senator Boyd, I'd like to look at because here's the thing, we obviously want and demand that our schools provide services, but we also want to make sure that we have, you mentioned CALC and the training. We were looking at numbers. I think in the public school setting, we have, based on our MSIS system, I think we counted like 65 dyslexia therapists. Now, there's more than 65 that have the certification, but they may be working private entities. So I do agree that we may have to do something to push services for dyslexia, but I also want to make sure we do it in a twofold process, that when we do push it, that we also have resources that districts can depend on to help those students. But I will say this, and Dr. Evans may agree with me, or I know he agrees with me, we need to do it sooner than later. I mean, every day that we don't do it or every year that we don't do it, that's students that aren't receiving the intervention.
So, a law that I would like to highlight is around, new teacher certification. So in 2016, a law passed that requires, all elementary education candidates, be able to pass a rigorous test of scientifically research-based reading instruction and intervention in order to become certified. And so at the time, it was established that that would be the foundations of reading tests. So if a candidate did not pass that test, then they would not be able to receive a license. However, with some of the innovative licensure programs that we've had and that we've implemented, and then the fact that we do have other options for high school students to pass in lieu of one particular test. The state board recently approved a completion of Pathways to Proficient Reading, or the AIMS professional learning, as an option in lieu of passing the Foundations of Reading assessment. So this is an effort to maintain the rigor while addressing the teacher shortages in elementary education through feedback that we've received from the districts or universities. So a student could either meet it by passing the Foundations of Reading test that's been required since 2016, or meeting the new AIMS option in order to get a certification.
And then, I would also be remiss if I didn't talk, it's not necessarily new law, but it's in early childhood, there has been a lot done to assist in us reaching those 10, national, quality indicators. One of which is increasing, the, teacher qualifications for those programs, ensuring that the teachers that are in those pre-K programs are trained, and that they are, they're well versed in the practice of early childhood. There has been additional funds. I know at one point MDE had a grant, and when the grant ended, the legislature appropriate funding to continue some of those programs. So that has been extremely helpful. And then we also we're going to begin using Mississippi Get Beginnings pre-K curriculum. I know that I talk about high quality instructional materials a lot, and I know y'all are probably saying, stop, but it is so important. Teachers, have a huge responsibility. And with these materials, when adopted, it gives them an opportunity to truly teach. They do less planning, but they're truly teaching. And we know that the materials are aligned to the rigorous standards that we're talking about. So, when I was teaching up 10 years ago, I had to go, I had to create my lesson plans, and I had to find resources. And some of those resources were aligned to the standards and had the rigor. But to be honest with you, some of them didn't. And so when schools and districts adopt these high quality instructional materials, they are ensuring not only the rigor, but the consistency from classroom to classroom. Okay, so that every student is receiving quality instruction. And the other thing is we've built an infrastructure where not only does the state determine what the high quality instructional materials are, but we've developed tools for districts and their teachers to assess any material to determine, does it meet the standard of a high quality instructional material? Because we do believe that in addition to professional learning, we do believe that high quality materials and training on those materials is key to continuing our success here in the state. And I believe there was a possible question.
Senator Blunt has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing that up. Can you help? Well, let me back up. It seems to me that part of the reason for our success, particularly in reading scores in early education, is that there is a single consistent statewide training. And I get confused on the difference between standards, curriculum, training,
Mhm.
And materials.
Mhm.
But it seems to me that to the extent the state can provide consistent, uniform training to all the teachers in the state on whatever subject it is that she or he might be teaching,
Mhm.
that's beneficial.
100.
Can you help me understand whether or not we have decentralized a lot of these decisions regarding curriculum and materials and training, and how much we have, or should we continue to centralize those materials and curriculum instead of having a curriculum decided at 140 different school districts, hard to train people when they've got different types of books and different types of curriculum? How should we think about standardizing that in identifying what works, picking the right materials, training everybody in the same way based on the science of whether it's reading or math or whatever the subject may be? How centralized should that process be, and how much have we left that up to the individual districts to do on their own, some of whom may do it well and some of whom may need a little help?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Thank you for it. I'm going to use literacy as my example, or ELA as my example. I mentioned earlier that about 90% of our K-8 schools have adopted an HQIM. And what I mean by that is, we used to have what we call the textbook adoption list, and it's still referenced as a textbook adoption list, but basically that is the high quality instructional materials. And to your question, standards, those are the overarching This is what a child needs to know and be able to do. The curriculum equates to the high quality instructional material. What materials are you going to use in order to ensure those students have the knowledge and skills that are in the standards? So what we have now is in ELA, we have approximately 5 options on high quality instructional material. Okay.
This is at all grade levels.
At all grade levels.
Okay.
Yes, sir. About 5 options. Now, in years past, when I was in the classroom, that may have been 15, 18, but the reason we have 5 is because, as I mentioned before, we're really digging in to determine it's no longer, do you meet 75% of these standards? It's, do you meet 100% of these standards? Is the rigor there? Is the good quality tier 1 instruction there? Is the interventions there?
State is taking a more active role
That's
and
correct.
limiting the choices to what you've identified as being effective.
That is correct.
All right.
And not only that, but in literacy, because of our coaching model, our coaches who are going into our classrooms are actually trained on these instructional materials. And so when they go and they coach on the science of reading, they're coaching through the lens of the teacher's materials.
Right.
Okay. And that's been a game changer, a game changer.
Do we do that? And that's for reading from K through 12.
That's correct.
Do we do that in other subjects?
Yes, we have high quality instructional materials also in mathematics. We have them in science. I believe we have them in social studies. We have them in the core areas. Now, I will say that we're a little, as far as the training and the implementation, we're a little ahead of the curve in literacy because of the supports we have. But yes, we have high quality instructional materials in all of our core.
And you've shrunk that down to, so what I'm interested in is in the training for those other subjects.
Mhm.
What do we need to do to catch up in terms of training the coaches, providing coaches,
Mhm.
getting them trained and getting them to the districts in these other subjects like we have done in reading? What do we need to do to catch those other subjects up with the gains we place in reading?
Yeah, I believe in mathematics. You guys have made an investment in mathematics. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more tomorrow about some future plans in mathematics,
Okay.
because we want to build a similar coaching model in
Yes.
mathematics to that of literacy. We also want to grow our literacy coach model into an adolescent And I think that through the coaching model, we're going to find more opportunities to ensure true implementation of these materials. I also think, and Dr. Evans is having us work with statewide vendors in our state that are already going into our schools and working with our teachers and training them on the high quality instructional materials and how to speak the same language. Because what we want is we want a consistent message.
Exactly. So are the vendors and the coaches all aligned with the standards that the state has set, or are they all just out there?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
I can say that all our supports are singing from the same hymnal,
Right.
same page.
Okay.
And we also, I will say, of those five, the example I gave you, I could say that there's probably one that 60% of our school districts have adopted. You know what I'm saying? So we know that there are, within that five, there are certain materials that are adopted on an average much greater than some of the others. And so we spend a little more of our capacity and resources on those materials.
And when you say that the loss of some of the states that have not achieved as we have achieved probably give more autonomy to their individual districts. And we've got a state plan where everybody's being coached off the same
Mhm, yeah.
materials. Everybody's singing off the same page.
Yes,
They
sir.
can go into any district and train any teacher on the best possible materials that are going to
Mm.
meet the standards.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I look forward to hearing what you all propose tomorrow morning. I'm excited
Thank
about
you.
it. Thank you.
And in light of, oh, wait. Yeah, in light of your question, I wanted to show y'all just a little snippet of a video about a district that adopted high quality instructional material.
Well, one day at HQIM, teaching was learning from multiple sources and to ensure that students accomplish mastery. Also leaving gaps with the HQIM, they have everything that they need for tailoring instruction right there. That saves on the time, that saves illustration.
We have one single, illustrate sure that all students have access to grade level. I'm proud to say that this courageous decision has already been significant impact student achievement all over our schools.
And that is an example of a school district that quite honestly has a history of low performing. And we had coaches go in and the superintendent, as it starts with the leadership, made a commitment and he said, you know what? He said, we're going to do this. He cleared out all of the other resources and he brought it in and he had folks come in and train his teachers and they were committed to it. And the results they got, because you can't argue with the consistency of all of that. Now, Dr. Evans also whispered in my ear, I also want to make sure that we clarify that in the example of literacy, we have that list. Districts they have the autonomy to choose outside of that list. There are incentives for choosing a list or choosing from the list. And we're finding that as we go through this, that more and more of them are in fact choosing a high quality instructional material. And one more thing, not only are they choosing one, but we're finding that they're choosing a single high quality instructional material across the grade levels. Because in years past, you might go into a K2 school and they may be using one curriculum. And you go to a 3-5 school and they're using a different curriculum because the schools were choosing. But what we're seeing specifically in grades K8, there is a consistent HQIM through the grade level. So not only do you have consistency within the grade from teacher to teacher, but then you have that vertical alignment of curriculum.
It's optional for the school district to choose whether or not they want to use high quality instructional materials?
It is optional for them to choose from the list. It has always been the district decision to choose from the list, whether it be called a textbook list or material list. Yes, sir.
Optional under the statute, under the
The
regs?
statute. What is it? 3743-1. Is that right? 47, yeah, 3743-1 and 3743-31 are the two statutes. But it's always been the district's decision ultimately to choose whether they are going to choose from those material lists or not. And so what the attitude that we've taken is that we're going to show you why it's important for you and your children. And I think that's why we have had success in ELA and in mathematics on getting school districts to adopt the materials.
So I'm glad the conversation's turned to educators. Arguably, teachers are the most impactful driver of student achievement and it's really hard to build capacity and find qualified teachers and high-performing teachers for our classrooms. What's the MDE been doing to make sure that we do have a highly effective teacher in every classroom?
So I want to go back to, again, talking about the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. The MDE hired 29 literacy coaches to support 50 schools when LBPA was first instituted. And of course, we were working with the state's lowest third grade reading, the schools with the lowest third grade reading proficiency. And I will be honest with you, recruiting initially was a challenge because teachers were hesitant to give up their teaching gig in a district to come on board and do this coaching gig with the department. And so one of the things that they did years ago was developed a process known as the Educator in Residence Grant. And so what that allows us to do is it allows us to identify good quality teachers who are well-versed in instruction. They could continue to be employed by the school district, but we utilize them to coach in some of our lowest performing schools. So by 2018, using this model, we had built up coaches. We grew to 80 coaches serving 182 schools. Now, I'll be honest with you, COVID did do a number on that, and so that dropped, but we have built it back up or building it back up. I think this year we have about 65 coaches that are serving 103 schools, and our goal next year is to be back to that 80. And I'll also say this, that the teachers that we were serving, some of them were hesitant to allow our coaches in. I mean, that's not unusual. But what we found in the case of Dr. Hammett is that when we had leadership support, then we were able to implement the coaching model with fidelity and great success. And so that's been hugely important. I mentioned our statewide literacy training, the AIMS training, which is the science of reading training. It is available to any teacher K-3 free of charge. And we are perpetually training teachers on the science of reading. To date, we have funded approximately 20,000 educators have gone through the training that we offer. And then I also wanted to say, because we always talk about building it and the capacity, but I always look to see, is it quality though? I mean, you have a lot of something, but if it's not good something, doesn't matter. So an evaluation by the Regional Educational Laboratory, which is REL Southeast, they found that MDE's professional development improved teacher knowledge and practices in early literacy, and that Mississippi teachers' knowledge scores rose from the 48th to the 59th percentile in early literacy skills based on the research they did. So we were constantly trying to evaluate what it is we're doing and show that return on investment to make sure that what we're providing is making a difference.
So let's talk about teachers just a little bit more. How is the department helping to build teacher pipeline and equip a strong teacher workforce? And how have you been working with the education preparation programs or the pre-service programs to help build the capacity to teach science of reading? And more broadly, how are you supporting education preparation programs and district recruitment efforts?
So in 2017, MDE began working with our educator preparation providers, or we often refer to them as EPPs, to ensure that the Mississippi standards that we have for our program reviews reflected the national standards for the accredited programs. So from that, we developed the educator preparation process program and review guidelines. We finally had the final iteration of those were approved by the board in 2021. But these guidelines, what they do is they ensure that all elementary education candidates, whether they be in a traditional or a non-traditional program, complete what we refer to as the core 4 literacy courses in order to become certified. So those are the literacy 1, literacy 2, reading and writing across the curriculum, and diagnosing and assessing reading difficulties. So this was an effort to ensure that all elementary candidates were prepared to deliver the literacy instruction that was aligned to the science of reading that, as we've stated many times today, we believe has led to much of the success and outcomes that we've seen. More broadly, we're supporting teachers through recruitment efforts with our redesign of our Teach Mississippi website. So for time's sake, we won't demonstrate this for you today, but what this website does is it features an interactive licensure tool for prospective educators, and it helps them find their way to the classroom. And it also provides inspiring content for prospective educators to want to teach in Mississippi. And so this website also, what it does, it helps simplify things for educators, whether they're wanting to become an educator or where they're already a licensed educator and they're trying to navigate through the MECA portal, or what we refer to as the Mississippi Educator Career Continuum Archive. It's MECA, our new licensure system. The website has a quiz. So if you go and you want to become an educator in Mississippi, it just starts by asking you questions. Do you currently have a license? Yes or no? And then if you have a license, it's going to direct you to the path of a licensed teacher that will help you navigate MECA to either renew your license or add an endorsement to your license. Or if you're seeking to get an advanced degree, what you would need to do with that. But if you're not an educator, then it starts asking questions about whether or not you have a BS degree and so on and so forth. And it will help direct that prospective educator to the pathway. It also, the pathway that might benefit them most based on their background and their ability to go back to school. It also provides a section about the benefits of Mississippi and interactive salary schedule. It highlights all the benefits of teaching in Mississippi, and it includes the incentives that we have, like the William Winter Loan Forgiveness Program. And then it also highlights our state being rated number 2 in affordability. The other thing that this website does is it connects with our MECA talent portal. So what districts can do with the talent portal is they can create a profile account and post job vacancies. So individuals that are looking for a teaching job in Mississippi can browse the website, and they can apply for open positions across the state. And they can look for vacant positions by grade level, by content area, or even location. and they can apply for these open positions online. And this is also a way that the EPPs can promote their initial licensure and add-on certification programs to potential candidates. So we're very excited about this. It's hadn't been active but for maybe a month to 6 weeks now, but we're getting a lot of feedback on how it helps prospective educators as well as current educators navigate the licensure process.
Oh,
Question. So, and refresh my memory on this. So I know we have a teacher shortage and so forth. So say, for example, someone like Senator Wiggins here, who's got a JD, doesn't have a teacher certificate, anything like that. Say he wants to become a teacher. How quickly could he get certified or something, or to become a teacher in a classroom? Say he wants to practice the law and actually earn an honest living for a change.
So
Is there a way he can circumvent and instead of going through the 2 years or whatever, get this certificate
well,
fairly
he's
quickly?
going to have to go through the alternate certification process, but that can happen as quickly as an individual would like that to happen. And how one does that, the more of the requirements that you meet up front with, like having higher than a 21 or higher on the ACT, or being able to pass the praxis specialty test and have the
We'll have to
degrees in
pass
that.
We're not doing away with the practice or anything, are we?
Right, right,
Okay.
correct.
You'll still have to pass it, okay.
Yes, sir. On the specialty area. Now you can be exempt with your ACT score on that, but there is, through the alternate route program, there's the 6 hours that you would have to take. And I mean, I've seen educators do it in less than a year. I mean, you can do the 6 hours the first semester, and then the internship that's built in with that the second semester. The law allows us to give you a license for up to 3 years in order to complete that process. But
So he could be in or person can be in the classroom almost immediately.
you can be in the classroom immediately
3
with
years
a
to-
district requested license if you have a BS degree or 18 hours and then enroll in the program. We
Okay.
can immediately get you in the classroom, and then you have 3 years to complete.
Okay, all right, thank you.
the one other piece that I will,
Senator Bryant has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the sinking feeling this may have been mentioned early on and I just overlooked it. Is there an attempt to attract teachers from outside the state to Mississippi?
Yes, sir. We're have recruitment efforts. We put recruitment fairs. So yes, sir, we would like to recruit teachers to Mississippi to address our shortage from any area.
Well, it seems to me there's a coalition of several, whatever, not coalition, but a combination, whatever, of several things that might attract at least some people to Mississippi. One is the increase in scores across the board, and particularly in places where the scores have historically been very low. I think that there are people that would be attracted to come to Mississippi and see firsthand what's going on. Secondly, one of the things that Mississippi has that we don't think about as an attraction is that we're exotic. You know, there's not a whole body of literature about Nebraska, for Pete's sweet sake. And if you get people to come here, some of them will stay. They get married and things like that. They find that they like living in small towns and things like that. And I know that we spend a lot of time talking about how to attract people to Mississippi. And it seems specifically, this is something that might appeal to folks. And I guess what I'm asking is, ramping up the recruitment process with a somewhat explicit pitch like that might pay dividends. And if that's already going on, just strike that. Oh, yes, in memory of the late, great Hanan Miller. My question is, don't you agree with me?
Yes, sir. I do agree. We will have some interesting information for you tomorrow on some annual surveys that we conduct around the educator workforce survey and the teacher retention and recruitment surveys. And one thing that I'm not gonna do a spoiler alert or anything, but one thing that we'll find that prohibits us from attracting teachers is that all of the neighboring states around us and most all states have higher pay than we do in Mississippi for teachers.
But we've got this great retirement system. I'm sorry, strike that.
One other thing I wanted to mention is not only are we working through Dr. Vanderford's office, but in the Office of Division of Literacy, we have partnered with 13 institutions of higher learning and formulated a group called the Mississippi Educator Preparation Program Literacy Network. Now, that's a lot. But this group is made up of EPPs, or education preparation providers, as well as literacy experts in the state and MDE's Division of Literacy. And we meet every other month to talk about the teaching of the science of reading, because in order to ensure that students are getting the instruction that we need them to have and they deserve, we've got to kind of have a two-front process. In that we are training teachers who are in the classroom, our practicing teachers, but at the same time, we're working with our EPPs to ensure that the students who come out of their programs already have that training. And so it alleviates the expense of us having to train them once they come into the classroom and they're prepared to hit the ground running. So again, we've had 13 institutions join us in that effort. So that's been very positive.
Okay, so this will be the last question on the teacher workforce. Mississippi has implemented some pretty innovative programs to address the shortage, in addition to what you've talked about, specifically the teacher residency and the performance-based license. Can you tell us a little bit more about the impact those programs have had?
Yes, the Mississippi Teacher Residency Program, or often referred to as MTR, is a state-led residency that's designed to expand the teacher pipeline by combining the coursework with job-embedded training opportunities to prepare educators for the teaching profession. Our performance-based licensure pilot, or often referred to as PBL, is a nationally unprecedented effort to apply performance-based initiatives to the current licensure testing requirements. Both of these innovative programs began with a $4.1 million grant. And after piloting both programs, we learned that PBL, or the performance-based licensure, could be run actually as a no-cost licensure pathway in the state, contingent upon an educator meeting the effectiveness measures within the professional growth system, as well as the measures for student outcomes. So there's a criteria that they have to meet in lieu of passing the test that is very rigorous. Subsequently, the MTR program was funded with $9.8 million of ESSER ARP funds. But what we're most excited about is that in 2025, we received a $3.5 million appropriation for MTR. So together, these innovative pathways have served 69 geographically shortage districts. They've led to 149 educators becoming certified in elementary education, led 72 educators to become certified in special education. And since the onset of these programs, we've expanded to participation with 3 universities to now 9 universities, thanks to your support. And thank you, Chairman DeBar and Chairman Robertson, for recognizing that these programs will help build a strong pipeline of committed educators who will serve in some of our most underserved communities. And with that, we have a short video that we would like to show you regarding the impact of these programs.
People who can remember teaching, people who can get it done, people who care about it. They're able to see the results. So while they might not have passed the requirements, they are living proof. Our children's results are living proof that they are quality teachers.
My passion is just kids and also giving them the insight that I wish I had at their age. What I always try to do is inspire them to be something that people say they can't. A 6th grade teacher, what motivated me to believe that I was to believe that I was more than what people said I was. And that kind of sparked the passion to be the one teacher.
So Paula, Wendy, thank you so much for sharing all of the information that you did with us today. It's probably felt like a really nice break from all the implementation work you've been doing at the department. So thanks for being here. As we're closing, I just want to say Mississippi is doing so many things right. You need to stay the course. Excuses are easy, just like miracles. Kids in Mississippi deserve the hard work, not just our prayers. So keep pushing, keep going. We can do this. You need to commit to rigorous standards and expectations. Don't settle for just moving up in the rankings. We're competing not just with our neighboring counties, but with our neighboring states and also globally. We've really become a global economy now. And we're not just educating for education's sake. This is about our economic future of our state, the workforce, and making sure that all students have the opportunity to have social and economic mobility. So thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you. Any further questions for the panel or anybody? Senator Bryan?
Mr. Chairman, there was a reference earlier to the 4-year-old program, and the comment was made that it's an opportunity for children to learn to work together. And I was reminded that when I was in elementary school, we actually got a grade on works and plays well with others, and I did not do well in that grade. But notwithstanding that, sometimes we forget the importance of, for lack of a better word, socialization of children in our public schools. They do learn to be around other children. Ideally, they learn to be around all sorts of children's of all different types. And that's an experience that not everybody has. It's the thing that we all have in common. And it's also the case where, frankly, teachers who have some idea of what's going on at home can find a child that looks like there may be some issues at home, and it's a great screening device to find problems that otherwise just might never come to light. And I think no one's more excited than I about the progress that we're making in academics, and no one's more devoted to that than I am. But at the same time, I don't think we need to lose sight of the other advantages that come from school. I remember after Katrina in particular, there was just an obsession of getting the schools back open because it was a sign that things were coming back. it was a sign that something was normal. And that exists on some level every day, everywhere, in every public school. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bryan. Senator Polk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may have looked at this data, you may not. What's the most expensive grade to teach in Mississippi?
Make it back to.
I want y'all to do your homework and come back tomorrow.
Sir, yes, sir.
The reason I ask that is over the 14 years I've been here, I've met with a lot of people. And one of the things that seem to keep coming up and bothers me is everyone says pre-K and kindergarten are so formative and so important. But yet we don't teach that to every child. We don't have them in that. But yet we all have our students who are seniors in school. And the more I look at the senior year, the more it seems to be a social year and not a learning year. And I'll use my grandchildren as the examples. They don't go to school half the time. I walk to school uphill both ways in the snow in South Mississippi. It's different now. So my question is, standing around the water cooler, especially if Dr. Evans is around there getting a Red Bull or something, do y'all ever discuss if the 12th grade is really worth the effort as opposed to what we could get out of pre-K and K?
That's a great question, Senator Polk. You hear about,
May I comment?
yes, you may, go ahead. Maybe.
I too walked uphill both ways, but you can find, Senator, when we were, what we've heard about the Collaborative Act and that debate was going on, what we heard, and it's been said, is that you get more value for your money in the places you're talking about than on the 11th and 12th grade. And to your point, I too have seen that. I'll take my son, went to one class the 12th grade year. I mean, something needs to be looked at, and we're spending money to that. And it's a 7-to-1 return, at least a 7-to-1 return on investment on the early education side. So if we're looking at that, I think the point you bring up is specific.
One of the comments, and again, we'll talk further about this and bring something more formal back, but this is my, I think, 34th year in public education, and I too walked barefoot. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't do that. However, I will say this. I do believe, and we do talk about this around the water cooler, what the 12th grade year needs to change. The 12th grade year is really about transitioning into the post-secondary experience. And I believe that senior year should be about helping every individual child take their next best step into whatever their endeavors are after high school. I mean, that's what that senior year is about, is that transition. And we talk with IHL and community colleges all the time about something called summer melt, when students grab their diplomas and they have these plans and they've talked to their counselor and their teachers about, this is what I'm going to do. And then there are various obstacles that happen in just a little 2-month period. And those kids don't follow through with what it was. And it can be everything from they can't fill their gas tank to whatever the case may be. And it's kind of, they're in a precarious situation because we've patted them on the back and sent them on their way. And they haven't been received by the post-secondary institution yet. And so they're just there. And I just feel like, and I think Dr. Evans has talked to us about this, is that we need to do all we can their senior year to ensure that not only they have a plan, but we can help them go ahead and start executing a plan that will make them or help them be more successful in taking that next best step. So I just think we need to look at what does the senior year need to be in 2025 and going forward? Not if it needs to be, but what should it be?
Well, I'm glad to hear that, but I'm concerned right now that we're wasting money with the senior year, with the return we could get in earlier with the younger kids. Thank you.
Senator, could I make one comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my colleagues are going, he was going to find a way to talk, you know what I mean? So, thank you for that opportunity. I would tell you that, it's not just the senior year, it's a redesign of the entire 9 through 12 experience, that we have to work on, that we're talking about and working on. And I also don't disagree. I wouldn't want to make the statement as a general statement that 12th grade as a whole across the entire state is that way, because it varies. To be honest with you, it varies by district as to what that senior year looks like. Because some of our districts have redesigned what that 9 through 12 experience looks like. They've shifted those credits down to our middle school grades in order to create opportunities for the 11th and 12th grade. So I recognize that there is an issue with our senior years in some of our districts. So that we have made some efforts also as far as like early graduation. We've changed some policies at MDE that require districts to put forth a plan for students that are early graduates. I understand, I wish that no student would be an early graduate personally. I think that all students need to go all the way through the 12th grade personally. And that's my personal belief with my two children that are obviously products of public education. But I do want to give you a partial answer to your first question. Well, I would have to look to tell you exactly which ones are the most expensive. I will tell you the most expensive ones to not teach are pre-K and kindergarten. I would tell you that. That's what goes hands down, without a doubt, because that does form the foundation for their entire career. That was a very insightful question you had there. I'm going to go look and see which one is the most expensive.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Any further? Senator McClendon?
Thank you. And to add on to that statement you just made, and what I was asking before, we have 1,000 students, new students each year in DeSoto County. Now, if those students are not afforded early learning and come from a school district and start in a school district that is behind, so it's a double whammy. Are we punishing that school district for taking, we're receiving these children that are coming in that haven't had early learning, have been in a school district or school that is subpar, and there's definite stats to that. I would hope that we could look at possibly giving it 2 years instead of a 1 year before we started counting those schools. And if that were to happen, would that be an MDE decision, or would that be something that should be done legislative?
Yeah, I've never had that question asked, to be honest with you. So my response to your question would be, it's very difficult for us to account for where a student came from, whether they were from Tennessee or Alabama, because it depends on DeSoto County is close to Tennessee. Obviously, in North Mississippi, you're looking at Tennessee and Alabama. You have students that come back and forth. So this is not a negative. Don't take my responses in a negative way. That's why we, at large and in part, we have to just hold steady to our high standards in the state of Mississippi. We can never decrease those, and you're not suggesting that, I know. But we have to hold steady with our high standards, continue to raise them when is appropriate in our state. And we don't just face that with students. These are not just students that come to Mississippi from other states. We also face that same challenge with some of our EL students that come to us from other countries that have never been formally educated. Yes, sir. You have that. I know you have that as well. And I will tell you, we are looking at actually, in that case, increasing, because that's currently a 5-year process to get those students. Now, that's a totally different student. Their starting line was in a completely different place than a student that has been in formal education, has been formally educated. But that's something we could look at. I would tell you that that's not really an MDE call. I would tell you, as far as the stance that MDE has, is our districts have to get those students on grade level. When they come in, we don't have a choice. And I say that as someone who's been in a school district for 25 years before I went into the job that I'm in now, and who's faced those challenges and has had those students, because not all districts in the state of Mississippi are created equal. That's why we have to make sure, obviously, that, and that's not a negative statement, that's a factual statement. And we just have to have, it's been said in here about a dozen times that, you know, we expect, our expectations are very high across the board and we don't make excuses for them. So that's why we just have to carry on in that direction. But I completely understand your point that, that in your case, Corey, he's a friend of mine, right? Corey, that he has we have no control over what students, we have no control over what students we get. That is very much so the difference also in the public and private systems in our state. While private schools can pick and choose who they take, public schools cannot. You know, we're required to take all students. So, but I do sympathize with the point you're making, Senator. It is a very good point.
So let me just, so my mind is wrapped around this. So non-English speak children, are they on the same level? They've got 1 year to get caught up at the present time.
No, sir, they have more than 1 year. It depends on whether they're in the EL program or not, as to whether or not they test out. But you have to, that was a bad comparison, to be honest with you. I probably shouldn't have used, because those are two different starting lines completely. But there is a difference in that student and the student who transitions in from another state. They're not really comparable. That wasn't a very good example for me to use.
The EL students do take the MAP assessments as well.
Yeah, they all take the assessment. Yes, I'm sorry.
They take the ELPT assessment. And so that 5-year exit piece to proficiency, that's different from the account. It's included in the accountability system, but it is different. It's how we measure them differently on the tests that they're required to take in addition to the MAP test.
So math, yes, and the rest, no. Is that?
MAP, they take the MAP test, yes.
Because we have 30-something non-English, different languages.
Right, yes, sir.
Yeah, that's multiple districts experience that across there. You have that on the coast. You have that in the district where I left, you don't have quite 30, but you have many. And it's not just the language, it's the dialects within the languages that are spoken. So it's complicated. Yeah.
Thank
Turn
you.
to Senator Boyd for our last question.
My question is for Select Ed, and y'all have been such a great partner for us all these years, but we go to a number of conferences and we hear this state doing this and this state being very successful at any different piece. Is there anything from you who looks at a number of different states that you think is something very successful in another state that you think we should do? We always have our friends from Louisiana telling us that they're catching up and about to overcome us, of which we will not stand for. So do you have something that you think is really just an outstanding thing that we can do?
So I also had the pleasure of working on developing our math initiative at Excel and Ed. Alabama, your neighbor to the other border, implemented a numeracy initiative 2 years ago now, and have put in requirements for required 60 minutes of instruction in mathematics every single day for every single kid. Use of high quality instructional materials, making sure teachers are trained on those materials, using screeners to identify kids early to make sure we're providing the appropriate interventions, putting coaches in classrooms so they're getting real-time feedback on what they're doing, creating a micro-credential or certificate specifically for math for K-5 teachers, not just middle and high school teachers, but K-5 teachers. One of the things we find the most challenging assessment for teachers to pass is generally the math assessment, not always the reading assessment. So making sure that they're prepared to teach not just the pedagogy, but the actual content and mathematical concepts, and understanding the content below and above grade level for which they're teaching as well, so they can make those connections for students. If I may expand on what I would encourage you not to do, I don't know if we're running short on time or questions, but I had the privilege of working in the state of Florida for Governor Bush for both of his administrations. And everything we've talked about here today, from eighth rough school accountability, just read Florida and retraining every single teacher in the great state of Florida in the science of reading, to voluntary pre-kindergarten options for everybody, requiring an instructional materials adoption list, allowing for alternative certifications, not just for our lawyers, but for our rocket scientists who could not teach around the NASA schools in Florida, allowing for district certifications, incentive-based AP programs to make sure teachers could earn additional financial incentives for every student that passed an AP course. Florida was on a roll. We, at the beginning of Governor Bush's administration, were bottom 10 in the country on every single measure you could imagine, from reading, math, graduation, dropout rate, spending. We're still in the bottom for spending, but everything else, we're in the top 10 now. And everything took a very long time. It's been 25 years since we've started implementing all of these reforms in Florida. After he was term limited and he left, he wanted his legacy to persist. So he created Foundation for Florida's Future to make sure those things still got implemented. But what happened is Florida got a little complacent. They kind of let their foot off the gas on expectations, aren't consistently training the new teachers that are coming in. We still have coaches in classrooms, but we're not as insistent about making sure they're trained up as well. There are a lot of things they're just kind of pulling back on. Standards and assessments look very different than they used to. Accountability systems look very different than they used to. Florida's NAEP results plummeted in 2024. And I mean by more than half a grade level. It's hard to watch a state that just gets so comfortable in success that they don't continue to push forward. And our chairman for Excel and Ed, Governor Bush, always says, success is never final. Reform is never finished. You're never at the top of your game. We can always do something a little bit more. So I just encourage you to continue to push. It's hard. You get kids coming in that aren't prepared, but we can't make excuses. We're the only chance they have before they get out into the real world. And it's far easier and far cheaper to do it in K-12 public education than it is in our social systems once they leave our K-12 public schools. So we have a commitment to our kids. We have a lot of chances to do this. They only get one. So we need to make sure we don't fail them.
Senator Simmons for our last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard you say that the graduation rate for students with disability have pretty much tripled over the years. And I know Senator Boyd mentioned the dyslexia. So my question to you is, when you talk about autism, are the special ed teachers required to go through any type of training to teach this population? Kids with autism?
Turn my mic off. I apologize. I do not think that they're required for licensure to do that. Because again, with the number of special education teachers we have in the state, even though we're trying to grow that number, we have moved toward, I mean, 10, 12 years ago, we had probably 15 different licensures and they were very specialized. Okay. We've kind of moved a little bit away from that because we've got to get, teachers into the special ed arena. So the licensure piece is not there specifically for autism. But teachers who teach students with autism, and again, that may be a special education teacher. It may not be a special education teacher, depending upon, the district would have to provide training for them outside of the licensure requirements, to provide specialized and,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the presentation from all of you this afternoon. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Is that correct? Okay. Nothing further. We'll rise and we'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock.